So, for those who've been following me for a couple of years, you might recall about 2 years ago when I spoke to a professional disc golfer named Dallin Blanchard. Now, I have the opportunity to speak to his brother, Koy Blanchard, who I have been able to connect with at my full-time job, connected with him, and it's just kind of a funny world how things work out. And, now I'm friends with Koy, and I'm bringing him on, and we're going to be talking about the sport of disc golf, chatting about his experiences in the sport. We're going to be talking about his tournament that he's putting on in East Idaho, in Idaho Falls. It's called the Snake River Championship, and we'll talk about what the tournament's all about, how do you register, and what the plans are moving forward for that tournament in the future. So it's a really cool opportunity to learn about disc golf and show some support to that community, which is awesome. And then also check out the tournament that he's putting on. And I love talking to him about the business side of it too, and hearing his insight as to what he's learned from the business side of disc golf as compared to just being a competitor in disc golf. So we'll be talking all things disc golf today. So make sure to tap in and listen up. And I just appreciate all the sponsors who have helped out with the podcast: Athlete Narrative, Nation's Best Football, Summit Legal Consulting. Appreciate all of you guys for, helping out this year with the podcast. And I hope to, work with other companies. If you guys are interested in advertising on the podcast and, helping support me while I help support you guys, I have ad packages that I would be happy to send you out. It's very affordable and very effective ways of marketing to get yourself out there to more and more people. So hit me up if you're ever interested in working with me. But stay tuned for this one. This is going to be a really good episode of the Gametime Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Gametime Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's up, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast. I am your host of the show, Shane Larson here. 7.5 years running into the podcast, 182 countries, all 50 states. Thanks in large part to everybody who's tuned in over the last 7.5 years. Truly appreciate all of you guys. If you've been a guest, if you've been a listener, if you followed me on my social media channels, if you've left me a review, anything that you've done to help the channel grow, I truly appreciate it. And all I ask from anybody who listens, if this is your first time listening, welcome aboard. If it is your first time listening to the show, we love having you. All I ask in return is that you either subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform you're listening on, if that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever, or if you could do me another solid, leave me a review. If you're on Spotify, leave us a rating. A 5-star is always appreciated. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, every review helps the podcast get out to more and more people. That's the reason that it keeps ranking in different countries, is because people leave reviews of the show, and it helps it get out in front of more and more people. So nice opportunity for me today to introduce our guest. We're talking the world of disc golf. Okay, so if you guys remember, it was about a year ago or so, a little over a year ago, maybe almost 2 years ago now, I had Dallin Blanchard on the show, mutual connection. And Dallin Blanchard was a professional disc golfer. We talked to him about his experience in the sport. We had a really good reception on that particular interview. A lot of people listened to that one. It's the only one I've ever done about the sport of disc golf. Well, flash forward a couple of years, I've met more of the Blanchard brothers, and one of them's joining me today. And we're going to be talking to him about, his take on disc golf, as well as the tournament that he is putting on here in Idaho Falls, which is in Idaho. So if you guys are listening, it's on the east side of Idaho, about 4.5 hours away from Boise, or give or take a little bit, depending on where you're from, just to give you guys a little bit of an idea from a logistics standpoint. But his name is Koy Blanchard, and he's joining us. Koy, thanks for joining the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I'm excited to have you, Koy. So I get to work alongside Koy in our full-time work, and get to chat with him a lot about a lot of different things is what I'm trying to say. And I'm excited to have him on here and chat about the sport. So growing up with your brothers, Koy, you're one of the younger ones, right? I think you're the youngest of the crew.
Yeah, I'm the youngest.
Everybody kind of got into disc golf. Everyone got into disc golf. You're the youngest. Talk to me about what it was like growing up with the Blanchard brothers and the sport of disc golf, and how that plays a role in your guys', I guess, your guys' family.
Yeah, so I sort of followed a lot in the footsteps of my brothers. We didn't start disc golf until much later. I was, I think, 16 when I started. Some of my brothers were well into their 20s. But what we did a lot of the times is when we would go camping, we would always bring like our frisbees, either like an ultimate frisbee or the ones that you get at a parade. And we would go and before we even knew that disc golf was a thing, we would go and we would throw at trees and say, all right, let's throw this tree. And we basically played disc golf without even knowing it was a thing. Then my oldest brother, Garen, he was kind of the one that was introduced to disc golf, introduced the rest of us to it. And it kind of just made sense and it stuck. And now here we are.
Dude, that's so cool to me. You had shared that story with me before. It's funny because one thing I'll tell you guys about the Blanchard crew, at least the ones that I know, Koy specifically, he's good at everything. He's one of those guys that's really good at everything. If you guys get to know Koy, he's good at everything he does. He just threw a little Nerf football, like not even a Nerf football. It's like just a little soft football, 73 miles an hour at work yesterday. At the time of this recording, this was yesterday that he threw that. Like he goes and he plays golf, disc golf, whatever he's doing, he's pretty freaking good at it. Now, where would you rank yourself, Koy? I know you mentioned to me that you're not a professional disc golfer. Like, Dallin technically has his pro card, but where would you rank yourself amongst the brothers?
Oh, amongst the brothers. Right now I'd have to rank myself at number 2. Now, back in the day when it was when we were kind of all active in it, it kind of bounced between me and my brother Chris, between who was second, who was third. We're pretty equal, but he doesn't play a whole lot anymore. So, but I mean, Dallin's he's leagues above the rest of us. But I'd throw myself at number 2 right now.
That's so cool. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty details of disc golf itself. So you got the background behind you, all the discs, you got it all there. You take it pretty seriously. Now tell me this, like, what goes into, like, do you have nerves when you're playing disc golf? Is it more, we talked about this today, like technique versus consistency versus power versus what's the most important piece of it? How do you handle the nerves? Let's start there and kind of talk about the sport itself from your perspective.
Yeah. I'll start with nerves. Nerves, 100%. I mean, anytime I go into a tournament round, there's always nerves, and I'm trying to find a way to calm those nerves. But I mean, just recently, I played in the tournament where I walked up to the tee on the very first hole, the very last round. I threw it straight into the dirt, and then I threw it into like the nerves were there. I struggled on the very first hole. Took a quadruple bogey. It was done. The round was done for me. So nerves are there. One of the things that I've found that has helped me is, one, in practice, I always try to assimilate. I put myself in situations that I'm going to see in the tournament. I get my mindset in that same mindset. And I always try to think of it as like, okay, this putt, this is for the win. This, things like that. Try to get into that same mindset. And then the other thing is I will do positive self-talk whenever I'm walking up to a tee, walking up to a putt, and try to encourage myself, like, hey, you got this. You're going to hit this putt, or trust in the discs. Like, don't worry about what's going to happen. Just focus on what good is going to happen out of it. And I try to do that as much as I can, and I've seen it help a lot.
You don't. It's interesting because just knowing your personality, you don't seem like one that would normally get rattled. Like, you seem pretty calm, but I'm sure it's like one of those things where you're kind of quietly nervous. So you're trying to calm your nerves. Is there any kind of music that you listen to? I think I asked you this question at work, but like, do you listen to any music during tournaments that kind of helps calm your nerves, or do you not listen to anything at all? What do you prefer to do?
No, I typically don't listen to music during tournaments or anything like that. I know there's a lot that do. For me, it's more so I like to be engaged with the other people on my card, try to talk with them, joke with them, and to kind of make it feel more like it's a casual round. That's really what I do.
Okay. So that was my next point, though. I wanted to actually ask you this, is the competition factor. Obviously, there's the competitive side. People are trying to win. And then some sports, the majority of them actually, I mean, there's some trash talk that's involved. There's competitive spirits that are involved. It gets kind of heated sometimes depending on the sport you're playing. How does that compare to disc golf? It sounds like you try to get along with your competitors and whatnot, but what's the competitive fire like in the sport of disc golf when you're doing a tournament?
Yeah, I really think it all depends on First of all, personality. I'm someone who's I'm much more calm. Like I'm not really one to try and start a fire. But it also depends on where you're at in the rankings. If we're 2 rounds in and I'm like 3 cards down, it's not as competitive as if I was on the lead card, trying to compete for that first place. The most tense I've seen it is when there's like 2 guys battling it out for a first place, and even then it's kind of more you're just quiet. You don't really talk as much to your competitors, but there's not really like trash talking or anything like that.
Interesting, man. So tell me this, in the times that you've played, the tournaments you've played in, is there like a favorite course you've played on? Like which would be your favorite course that you've played on so far, in your career?
That's a good question. I think my favorite place to go play so far is there's this private ranch in Montana. They call it Swords Ranch. And really for me, like the course is pretty cool. You're playing on mountain golf where you're throwing across ravines, you're throwing into these big rock faces, there's pine trees. It's beautiful. But for me it's more of the nostalgic factor where I've over the years I've gone there with friends. We'll go camping, and just have like a really good time. And so for me, that's probably why it's my favorite place is because of the people that I've been with, the experiences I've had, but it's also just a really beautiful course to go play.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome. I remember like talking to Dallin, your brother, and just kind of the different places that disc golf has taken him and different places of the country, like just randomly, like the sport of disc golf has allowed him to go to different places, travel and play in different locations. And I just think that's kind of a cool, not spoken about enough type of feel about sports in general. Like sports can take you to a lot of different places just because of where you're going. And that's kind of goes along with that point when you say, this place, Montana, well, it's a nostalgic feel, but you got to go do that. You got to go play disc golf there. That's kind of like what took you over. That's what's cool to me.
Mm-hmm.
So let's flash back put yourself into a tournament. I want to know about one of your favorite tournaments and like maybe a shot that you had that was incredible. I know you've shown me some of the courses that we'll get to it. We'll talk about some of the stuff in just a second, but there's some holes. Like for example, you showed me a hole that is in the course, I believe, that you guys are going to be putting together in the Snake River Championship. It's like, it's a par 3, right? But it has to go over the lake, and there's like 2 trees, right? And then like you have to split the 2 trees, and there's like very little room for error. Has there ever been a shot that you've made that like just sticks out to you that you still, brag about to this day?
Oh yeah. There's, let's see, this was, maybe 2018. There used to be a big tournament that was ran in East Idaho every year. And there's this course over in East Idaho. It's called Bengal Ridge. And it plays kind on this ridge between 2 hills. And in tournament, there's this hole, it's hole 16 there at Bengal Ridge. It's like 460 feet downhill, maybe 50 or so feet. I mean, really cool looking. You're looking over the entire Pocatello Valley. And then there's this tiny little basket way down there, down the hill. And, historically, this is kind of one of those holes that I was always nervous to throw. But I stepped up to the tee and I threw it pretty hard, and the wind was kind of like taking it, and it disappeared into the clouds, and we're just like, man, where'd it go? And all of a sudden it came in and just crashed right into the chains for a hole-in-one in tournament. And it was insane. We erupted, and like everybody, you see like a couple people from other holes like poking their heads out through the trees to see what was going on. Like it was the coolest hole-in-one. We call it an ace, the coolest ace that I've ever seen and that I've ever thrown in person. Like it was pretty sweet. That's one that every time I step up to that tee for a tournament, that story always comes up.
That's sick, dude. That's actually really cool. So the number that's behind you on the sign, it says Koy. I think it says 10,086. Is that, am I reading that right?
100,086. Yeah.
10. Oh, there's one extra 0. Okay. Yeah. What is that?
That is my PDGA number. So when you sign up to join the Professional Disc Golf Association, they assign you a number, and that's kind of like your tag. So every tournament that you play in that's sanctioned by the PDGA, you get like a rating, and anyway, it's all tied to you and your profile.
I love it. You mentioned to me when you're putting the together this course, which again we'll talk about here in just a minute, but putting together the tournament, and you were explaining how each hole works, and you talked about, I think you said there's A and B throwers. Explain to me how it works, where like I guess the better players versus the not as good players, and there's different play, like they play off of different. I don't know how you would call it, tees. Explain it to us how that works for disc golf.
Yeah, and I could go pretty far into this, but I'll kind of keep it brief. So every tournament you're going to have different divisions. You have like your pro divisions, your amateur divisions, and then within each of those you'll have like the amateur divisions, you'll have MA1, which is the advanced, MA2 intermediate, MA3 recreational. And it's so you sign up really for whatever division best suits your skill level. So the way that we're running this tournament is we have an A pool, which is your pro players and your advanced players, and then your B pool, which is like your intermediate, recreational, anyone in women's or like old or age protected divisions. And really the purpose behind that, there's kind of two main purposes. Number one is obviously the skill level difference. There's the holes and the shots that we're requiring of the A pool for the pros and the advanced players are much more difficult than what we're requiring for the amateur players. And what that also does is it will separate the ratings for like when the PDGA does the ratings and stuff, and it kind of makes it a little more fair there.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So remind us, where do you fit in regards to those like divisions?
Yeah, so I would be playing pro.
Okay,
I'm kind of like I would say it's like a regional pro. Like I'm not going to go on tour or anything, but within like a regional area, I compete pro.
So Koy, tell me this: do you have aspirations to then be able to potentially go on tour and be able to play at that level?
I think if you asked me like 5 years ago, I would have said that'd be pretty cool. Now I'm kind of to the point where I'm like, I have a family, I have a career, so not really. It'd be fun to occasionally compete in a pro tour event. I've done it in the past and it was pretty fun, but for now it's kind of like I just want to compete well in my local tournaments and get a few wins every year. That's kind of where I'm at.
No, that's awesome, man. I do want to ask this. So let's use the sport of basketball, for example, because I coach basketball. Like there is a massive difference, even though there might not seem like one. We always talk about like some of the top college players, when they play some of the worst professional players, there's still a massive gap in talent levels. So like you'll see a lot of the pro guys that sit the bench all the time play some of the top level college athletes and still destroy them because they're professional athletes. Like there's just a skill level and a development that's just so much different than each level. You go up and up and up and up, and there's just like a gap there, right? And I always tell people that the casual fan of basketball never realizes that until they see it with their own eyes, just how much better a professional is. There's just a gap there than even the top college players. And so I guess my question to you would be like, what do you notice from some of the top level disc golfers that you've seen, whether you've competed against them or just watched them, compared to that of maybe like a regional person like yourself who can compete at the top dogs in the regional circuits and whatnot, and like it's still really good, but like what would you consider like the biggest difference between those guys that are consistently competing at a high level and maybe those who are not?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the answer comes down to consistency. Consistency in being able to repeat the shot over and over again. Like for example, an event that I played in pretty recently, just a few weeks ago, was at these wooded courses up in northern Idaho, where there were a few of those guys that you would kind of consider like, compared to basketball, they'd kind of be like the benched players that were there, and they smoked me, just destroyed me, and a bunch of other local pros. And it's because when you watch them, I mean, they consistently hit the gap. They consistently hit their angles. Everything is just so consistent. I mean, some of them, like I would say, a lot of that you would call like the bench pros, they don't necessarily have any skills that are above what I would have. So as far as like distance, both forehand and backhand, the ability to scramble, like there's not really anything there that they have better. I mean, they're a little step above that, but where they really shine is their ability to do it consistently. You know, they can consistently hit that gap, consistently hit that angle right.
Ooh, that's a good point. It's interesting to point out that's a topic for all sports. Like that's something that I think all athletes and everyone who listens to this should consider. That's why I am a shooting coach. And we were talking about that at work, and I do shooting coaching because like you'll see a kid who can shoot, but can you come in there and do it? Can you hit 5 shots without missing 2 in a row? You'd be surprised. All right, like we'll go do shooting training, and like anybody can hit a 3, anybody can hit 2 in a row. But can you hit 5 in that same spot without missing 2 in a row? You'd be surprised how many kids can't do that. And that's just a simple thing about consistency. Like, can you do that? And then the same thing goes into this, I guess, like with preparation. I'll ask you this, like the preparation is what I feel helps with that, right? Like being able to consistently show up to practice and do those reps over and over and over again is what develops that, at least in other sports. Do you feel like that's the same thing for disc golf, where you are putting in the reps time and time again to then become consistent? Is that what's ultimately developing them that way?
100%. Yeah. I think anybody that you see that has a very particular skill set, it's because they've worked hours and hours and hours on it, and they keep working on it. I mean, the time that I was at my best, my most recent best, I was out putting every single night or every morning. I don't remember what it was, and that was when I had putted the best. I was out playing every single day. That's when I was the most consistent. But I think those guys up at the top, they're putting in their backyard. They're out in the field doing field work. Yeah, for sure.
Dude, that's so interesting to me though, because like for other sports that are like quote unquote traditional sports, you can kind of practice at home sometimes too with like skill work. Basketball, you can do that. Football, go get a buddy and run routes right there in your front yard. But like sometimes with disc golf, you can't do that. It's like same as golf. You might have like a big enough backyard to do a couple of things here and there, but like you kind of have to go to a course, don't you? Like, so that makes it very difficult for the time, right? Like to like just the amount of time it takes to like actually go out and practice is pretty substantial, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you have a backyard, you can really at least practice putting. And some people, they'll throw up like a net in the garage. I don't really care for that because you can't see the flight. But yeah, it's a lot of time to have to go out to an open field, and you throw the discs, then you have to go grab them, then you walk back. It takes up a lot of time.
Okay, tell me this though. Like, are there like simulators? Like they have golf simulators? Do they do disc golf simulators that you can put up in your garage?
So very recently, I don't know how recent it is, but I've heard a lot about it very recently. There was a company called Tech Disc or Disc Tech. It's one of those two, that they've basically made some sort of a simulator where they have this little chip or something that goes on the bottom of the disc, and you can throw it into a net and it'll tell you like your nose angle. It'll tell you the speed. It'll tell you the spin rate. And I've known a lot of people that have bought those recently, that have started to use them and kind of test those out. But that's it. I mean, it's very new, like within probably the last few months.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's the Tech Disc. It says know your throw.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, you can get a distance driver for $300, fairway driver $300. Like, dude, it's a cool concept for sure. And they, like you said, they can throw them into their little net or wherever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the guy that I'm running this tournament with, Cooper, he just barely got one of those, and he was sending us some of his stats the other night and telling us how he's got to fix his nose angle. You know, he's always kind of had a nose up throw, but so I'm hoping that here in 2 weeks when I'm over there in East Idaho that I get to test that out. It's gonna be kind of cool.
Oh, that's pretty sweet, dude. Like I didn't even know that existed. It's cool how technology works for all sorts of sports, man. That's freaking awesome. So Koy, you're talking about, you know, the guy who's running the tournament with you. Tournament director is Cooper. You're the assistant tournament director. At least that's how it's listed on the website.
Yep.
We're talking about the Snake River Championship, 2024 Snake River Championship tournament out in Idaho Falls. Let's talk about that because the Gametime Guru, I'm one of the sponsors that is part of the sponsorship for your guys' tournament. I know there's other ones as well, but I just wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to share this. So tell us about the tournament. what it's all about. Let's talk about entry fees. What do we expect for weather? What can you expect if you sign up for the tournament? Where can we expect to find information about the tournament? Everything. Let's talk about the whole nine.
All right. Let's see where to start. First of all, you can find out about the tournament, get registered for it, everything on discgolfscene.com. That's kind of like the hub for being able to go and sign up for a tournament. I think depending on your division, entry fees are, I want to say $70 to $100, which is pretty typical for a tournament of this size. So if you're playing in an amateur division, you get a player's pack. That's pretty normal for tournaments. In ours, we're going to be doing a tournament stamped disc as well as a tournament T-shirt. So every amateur player will get one of those. Pro players, you're playing for cash, so you don't get anything in a player's pack. But hey, if you play well, you can get some cash at the end. The amateur players, they actually play for script to Infinite Discs. That's one of my sponsors, one of Cooper's sponsors. They're like the largest online retailer of disc golf. So yeah, trying to think where to go next with that.
Well, hold on.
You can expect.
Let's unbox this. Let's unbox this.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned cash prize. Okay, so I'm going to encourage everybody, go to discgolfscene.com/tournaments, and then you can find the 2024 Snake River Championship there. But let's say somebody's listening to this after the tournament's done. Cash prizes. So for a pro, there's a cash prize. Do you guys do it like tiered system, like first, second, third, or is it only first, like winner takes all cash prize? How does it all work for the cash side?
Yeah. The way that it works is you have to pay out 40% of the pro field. So, oh boy, I can't do math right now. But let's say you have a field of 20 players, you're going to pay out the top 8. Okay. Amateurs, I believe it's the top 45% of the field if you do something like script. But
explain to me
that's pretty much how it works.
For those who don't know disc golf, what does that mean?
It's basically just like a coupon. You get, here's $50 towards the store.
Okay, cool. See, I didn't know that. I did not know that that's what that meant. That's awesome. Okay, and is that 40% payout dealio? Is that standard across all tournaments that you guys do in disc golf?
Yep. That's the PDGA rule, is you have to pay out at a minimum 40% of the field.
Wow. Okay, that's actually really insightful. I'm glad I asked that because I had no idea. Okay, so what days and times does the tournament run?
So this tournament we're running July 13th and 14th. This is gonna sound crazy. We're doing 2 rounds of 18 per day, so 4 total rounds. Disc golf takes a little less time to play than golf, but we'll start probably 8-9 o'clock in the morning with players meetings and getting the players out to their holes. They'll play for 3.5 hours, have an hour and a half long lunch break. Then you'll play for another 3 to 3.5 hours, probably leaving the course somewhere around 5:30.
Are you going to be competing in your own tournament as well?
Yep, I will be competing.
So tell me this, from like the management side of things and trying to put this thing together, what have you learned from the business side of doing this tournament? I think you said you've done it before, right? So like what have you learned from the business side of disc golf?
Man, I have learned a lot. First and foremost is there's a lot that goes into a tournament, a lot that people don't see behind the scenes. You know, getting the right permissions from either the city, because we're doing one of the courses on a city park, the other's on private property, so having to talk to the people there to get the course or the property reserved. There's all the back end stuff of getting the tournament set up on Disc Golf Scene, on PDGA. They're getting sponsorships. That's a big part of it. Lots of things that go into that. And then for this tournament on the private property, we actually have to completely set up the course. There's no course there. We have a guy in Idaho Falls that we rent the baskets from. So we'll get a trailer. We'll go set up the course. We have to put down flags for the tee pads. We have to paint all the out of bounds lines. I mean, it's a lot of work. And then a big part of what I'm a part of is like the course design and getting out like the caddy books and everything like that. So, a lot of hours spent either walking the course, looking at maps, trying to figure out how I want to set up the holes so that it's fair, it's fun, but it's challenging. And then writing up all the hole rules. I mean, there's a whole lot of work that goes into that.
Holy cow, dude. Do you have to use your Excel spreadsheet knowledge to do any of that or no?
I don't. Just for this tournament, my co-tournament director Cooper, he's the one that kind of handles all like the finances and stuff. He's a lot of actually what I've learned in Excel and Google Sheets is from him. He's pretty smart. But he handles all that stuff.
Well, just so everyone knows, when I said that Koy knows how to do, like he does everything well, like I started working with him a couple months back, and Excel, if you guys don't know how to use Excel, or if you think you know how to use Excel, you don't know how to use Excel. And you don't know how to use Excel until you've watched Koy and even his brother use Excel. So it's a skill set that I'm pretty impressed with. That's why I asked that question. If anyone's wondering, like, why the heck would I bring that up? That's why, because Koy's really good with a lot of things, sports or putting a spreadsheet together. Koy, so if you look at the sport, I want to know, like, there's a lot of players. You've talked about a lot of players. I mean, there's your brothers too, but who is a player that you've looked up to in the sport of disc golf? That I guess, I mean, for me, I loved Brian Russell when I was younger. I loved Jeff Hornacek and John Stockton as basketball players. Have you looked up to any players in the sport of disc golf at all?
Yeah. The player that was probably most prevalent when I was first getting into the sport and throughout the years has been Paul Macbeth. He's amazing. He's a 6-time world champion. I've watched him many years. He's real calm, quiet, collected guy, but very consistent. My putting form, I've tried to model after him. Like there's a lot of things I modeled after him and looked up to him.
Shout out to Paul Macbeth, dude. That's funny you say that. There's a guy named Roberto Bergerson who used to play for Boise State back when I was in the 4th grade. He was drafted to the Blazers. I had him on my show. He's my favorite player of all time, of all sports, like for basketball, whatever. Like Roberto Bergerson was my idol when I grew up. And I changed the way I shot a basketball because of him. Like he was the reason I shot a basketball differently, because I saw how he was shooting and I decided to mimic that. And I've done that my whole life ever since. So you said you like kind of mimic how you putt and stuff, like how you throw the disc. That's awesome. Koy, so for those who are listening to this on Friday, the 5th of July, which is when this is launching the first time. But if you listen to this afterwards, that's fine. But like, you got a week. Is there still time to register? Like, when does registration close for this tournament you guys are doing for the Snake River Championship?
Yep. Registration is going to close on the following Wednesday. So the Wednesday right before the tournament. I think at 8 o'clock or something like that is when it closes.
That is the 10th, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So when you guys are paying, if you're listening to this right now and it's before the 10th of July, I'm going to have a link in the description for the Snake River Championship for you guys to go and sign up and register if you guys are interested in going and checking it out. Hanging out in Eastern Idaho, which is where Koy, he doesn't reside anymore, but that's where he's from and that's where he takes pride in. And there's a joke that goes on about that. He thinks he's better than everybody because he's from Eastern Idaho, but it's all good. I'm just joking. I love Koy. So Koy, I want to know from you, dude. So the community of disc golf, I think that there might be a perception that might not be 100% accurate, but maybe it is. So from somebody who's not involved in the sport, when I hear about disc golf, until I kind of met your brother and now I've met you and your other brother, I just thought of disc golfers as the dudes and women that would show up to like a park, 12 pack of beer. They're drinking the whole entire time. They're kind of rowdy. They're just like, they don't really take anything serious. It didn't really have a sense of professionalism. And that's not a bad thing. It just seemed more of like a backyard sport that people would just do as a leisurely thing, just hanging out, like a social activity with their friends. I didn't even realize it was like a big time serious sport until like I kind of got into that with your brother. So I want to know from your perspective, your opinion of the community for disc golf. Like, what do you see in the disc golf community? Is that a completely wrong perception of what it is?
No, not entirely. I think you definitely still have that. Like if you go to your local city park right now and go play some disc golf, you're going to see those people there. They're probably playing in flip flops or no shoes. Maybe even have their shirt off. They got their 12-pack of beer. Like, you're gonna see those people. I think those that are more kind of into like the competitive scene, you see a lot less of that. You see a lot more people that they probably grew up in sports, and then they've found a lifetime sport. Something that they can play all the way up until, I don't know, they throw their arm out or something. But so like you'll see a lot more of those people that are a little more athletic, that have been a part of sports their whole life. But generally, the community is full of really good people. I've some of my best friends I've met because of the disc golf community. So yeah, it's a really good community of people, and you're gonna see all kinds of people in it. But that's kind of what makes it fun.
Yeah, it's very inclusive. That's cool. Like, you guys have that's awesome to hear, because it just shows that you guys have a pretty supportive group. I'll tell you this, from my perspective, from a sports media personality, just like when I brought on Dallin to the show, the amount of people that actually listened to that podcast, it was actually astounding to me, because I'm like, what? But it just kind of showed the support that the community had. I mean, I didn't know until just right now more of like the opinion of the personalities, but I just knew that they were supportive. Like, the community was super supportive and wanted to, like, get more exposure to the sport itself. So that was pretty cool for me. And then to hear that, I mean, it's cool. It's cool that you guys have a pretty welcoming and supportive community, and that's pretty inclusive. So
yeah, it's a super supportive community. People love growing the sport of disc golf, and they love to support it any way they can. It's kind of cool.
Tell me this: does your wife play disc golf, or is it just you?
No, she does not. I've tried to get her to play a few times. She'll maybe last like 3-4 holes, but yeah, she doesn't really care to play it, but she loves to come watch.
I was going to ask that. See, that's kind of how my wife is. She's pretty supportive of the sports I compete in, but she doesn't necessarily play them herself. So that's cool. At least you got the supportive spouse on that front too. Okay, my last question for you, Koy. I want to know what your best throw is. Is it a drive? Are you better at driving, putting? What's like the thing that, if you could say like the trademark or whatever it is for you, like Koy Blanchard, what sets you apart in the sport of disc golf? What's your best throw and why?
Yeah, so I've kind of always been known as the guy that can throw a really good backhand hyzer. Whether it's and I'll tell you what that is in a minute. Whether it's like a distance driver, fairway driver, whatever it is. And so really, here I'll grab a disc to kind of show you. So the natural way that a disc is going to go, if you're throwing right hand backhand, is it's going to fall down to the left. So if I'm here, let me back up a little bit. If I'm throwing a hyzer, what I'm doing is I'm starting it on that left angle so that it never turns and moves the other way, so that it just kind of crashes down to the left. You're typically not getting as much distance on it, but it is a more accurate throw. But I've always kind of been known as the guy that can throw a pretty good hyzer.
That's pretty cool, dude. So how far can you throw? Like, what's your furthest like throw?
Oh man. I would say if we're talking like consistently off the tee, I'm probably hitting somewhere around 450 feet. But max distance, if I'm out in a wide open field, I can maybe hit 500 sometimes.
That's ridiculous. I just want people to know, like, if you don't play this, I saw you and your brother throwing a disc when we went up into the mountains for a work event, and the ability it seemed like effortless to like get that thing that you just flung it, and it was like online, and it was just gliding. It was perfect. It's just insane to me how easy you guys make it look. However, I have to ask, have you ever dealt with an injury? Because that's a lot of force on the elbows, the shoulders, the wrists sometimes. Even the fingers probably hurt from the way that you snap it and like hold it. I don't know. Like, have you ever felt like you're sore after you're done playing a round of golf, disc golf?
Oh yeah, I'll feel sore. That's for sure. But as far as an injury, I've never sustained an injury from disc golf, but I had a jammed middle finger that I kept aggravating over the course of a year, and it made it so I couldn't throw this way. I could only throw backhand. But I've never like really injured myself playing disc golf, but definitely get sore after a big tournament. I bet I'll be pretty sore after this upcoming tournament.
That's a lot of holes to play in a 2-day time frame, dude. When you're saying that,
it's going to be probably close to 100 degrees. So it's gonna be rough.
Is there any type of thing in disc golf where there's like a weather advisory where like you'll close up shop? Like, football, they'll play through anything except for lightning. What's the kind of the rule for disc golf?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. If there's lightning, they typically have a delay until it's safe. I have seen a tournament get canceled because of wind. It was like a big windstorm came through where it was like knocking over trees, so it was unsafe. But that's really about it.
What's the worst conditions you played in?
I was just gonna say in tournaments, I don't think I've played in too much snow, but like I've played in some pretty heavy snow before, just kind of like playing a little local tournament that didn't really mean a whole lot, but I mean, you're slipping and sliding on the tee pad. You're wiping the snow off the disc, and you're covered in snow. That's probably some of the worst that I've had to play in.
God, it just sounds miserable to me. That's so cool, dude. Well, what else do you want to share about the Snake River Championship, man? Is there some additional information you'd like the listeners to hear? Are you signing autographs while you're there? Like since you're the special guest here, like what are you doing? Like what do you want the listeners to know about Snake River Championship this year and potentially in the future too? Are you guys going to try to run them in the future as well, or like just any information you have?
Yeah, no autographs, but I mean I think this tournament it's growing into one that people recognize as it's a very well ran tournament. It's elite. It's a lot of fun, but it's very challenging. I think we're definitely planning to continue to run this. There's even talk. I don't know if this is actually going to happen yet, but there's talk about kind of doing a Snake River series where we have maybe 5 or 6 tournaments leading up to the Snake River Championship as part of a big series. But yeah, it's and maybe hopefully in a few years we can get it to an even bigger level where we have more added cash, more players. So yeah, it's getting a pretty good reputation so far, and I think it's only going to get better as people learn about it and play in it.
If it gets bigger and does that, like, are you going to sign autographs then?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know. They won't be worth anything, but sure.
They will be. See, Koy, that's what I'm trying to get at here. Like, Koy needs to be signing autographs, dude. This is super cool to me to hear this all. So the only other thing I thought I would ask you, you mentioned Infinite Discs. Do you have an affiliate link of any sort that you get, credit for if people sign up under your affiliate link or anything of that nature with Infinite Discs? I don't know.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, they used to do something kind of like that, but they don't do that anymore.
Okay. But
cool.
I just
you
wonder.
You can still shop Infinite Discs. Really
well, okay, let's give them a shout out still, though. I want to give them a shout out. You've used their discs, obviously. You know what they're about.
Yeah.
Like, why choose Infinite Discs?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing for me, the reason really that I kind of started with Infinite Discs is number one, their selection is just huge. They have the biggest selection in all of disc golf. They take a picture of every single disc, so you know exactly what you're getting. And then they've kind of started their own line of discs a few years ago. I throw almost exclusively those. They're manufactured by Innova Champion Discs. That's who I used to throw before them. But they make the right stuff that I like to throw.
I dig it, man. I dig it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's Koy Blanchard. I hope you guys, take something from this interview. And if you did, leave us a review. Let us know. Leave us a comment wherever you're listening to this on. Let us know what you thought about it. And I would also encourage you guys to follow. I mean, Koy, do you guys have a social media for the tournament, or you're kind of quiet on social media, but I just want to know if there was any other place they can follow you or follow the tournament or follow Cooper. I don't know. Is there anyone you would encourage us to follow? Yeah,
I'm like you said, I'm pretty quiet on social media. We do have a tournament Facebook page. It's just the Snake River Championship is the Facebook page. We don't have a lot of followers on there, but no one really in particular, I think.
Okay. I will try to find that page and I'll put the link here in the description. Funny, I literally just typed that and Dallin Blanchard pops up. How funny is that? So your brother just pops up.
You could follow my brother.
No, dude. So if you guys want to listen to that episode, that was episode 267 with Dallin. back then. It's almost been 100 episodes since, and that's kind of cool that Koy's coming on now. So, but yeah, Koy, I just appreciate your time, man, being willing to join me and share more about the sport and more about the tournament. And hopefully, we'll chat more. I'm sure I'll see you soon. But for all those who are listening, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button because we'll be coming to you next week with another interview. Take care. Massive shout out to Koy Blanchard. Thank you guys for listening to this interview with Koy. He was phenomenal. I hope you guys thought so too. A reminder, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every review is just amazing. It helps the growth of the show. If you've ever wondered how does this podcast get out to more and more people, it's because of the reviews. So if you could, hit us with a review on Apple Podcasts, hit us with a review on Spotify, or hit us with a subscribe on YouTube. It helps the show get out to more and more people. And like we said at the end of the interview, if you subscribe, you'll be able to hear all the interviews that we got coming to you every single Friday. So we'll be coming to you next week with another one. Take care.